1, the importance of wetlands. You can just see a statistic there that shows Ontario accounts for approximately 25% of all wetlands in Canada and about 6% of all wetlands globally. I've just included a picture there that shows the locations of wetland regions in Ontario. You can see the millions of hectares within each wetland region, so I just kind of wanted to visually depict how much land it actually makes up. So wetlands form a connection between land and water. We've learned a lot in this class of the negative impacts of fragmentation. So wetlands actually have the ability to connect regions to each other, which benefit not only the landscape, but amphibians and other various species inhabiting the area. They're also considered biodiversity hotspots, as many species rely on these wetlands. Later on, the Blanding's turtle is discussed and how wetlands affect its way of life, so it's important to protect species such as the Blanding's turtle, as land conversion and invasive species currently poses serious threats to wetland conservation. Wetlands are of immense economic value, producing at least $14 billion in economic benefits for Ontarians each year. A study in 2017 revealed that leaving wetlands intact has the ability to reduce financial costs of floods by up to 38%. Therefore, investment in wetland conservation would be extremely beneficial, as it cuts costs on various services such as water filtration, flood mitigation, and soil retention. The Ontario Wetland Conservation Strategy is discussed later on in detail, but its main goals are to halt net loss of wetlands by 2025 and by 2030 have a net gain in wetland area and function. Slide alluded to, ecosystem services provided by wetlands exhibit just some of the valuable services that they offer. Although many of these services are self-explanatory, I think it's very important to highlight them. Wetlands have the ability to simultaneously mitigate the effects of climate change while also being greatly threatened by it. While climate change is contributing to its deterioration, wetlands are battling it by providing flood mitigation, erosion reduction, and water quality improvement. Wildlife habitat and cultural and spiritual significance are just some of the services that you cannot put a monetary price tag on, but are still immensely valued by Ontarians.
Wetlands are essential to life on Earth. They support thousands of freshwater species and are one of the most vulnerable ecosystems to climate change. Climate change will most likely impact wetland habitats differently on a regional and a mega watershed level. Therefore, it is important to recognize that specific management and restoration issues will require examination by habitat. Below are a couple different types of wetlands and how they are affected differently. For example, peatlands are an important natural ecosystem with high value for biodiversity conservation, climate regulation, and human welfare. They are characterized by the accumulation of organic matter derived from dead and decaying plant material. They are also highly sensitive to changes in hydrological cycles. Lowered water levels contribute to the decrease of oxygen available in surface soil, which may be assumed to result in lower rates of organic matter decomposition. Because of its location, parts of Canada are projected to experience greater rates of warming than many other regions of the world. Canada has an abundance of water, but it is not evenly distributed throughout. As a result, most regions of Canada experience water-related problems such as floods, droughts, and water quality deterioration. Southern Ontario is likely to experience higher temperature, leading to more frequent and severe droughts. Southern Ontario has lost a large majority of their wetlands, estimated to be as much as 70 to 90% loss in some regions. Effects due to climate change are likely to be intensified by current land and wetland management practices, such as the construction of drainage systems, which remove water from the landscape, increasing flood flows, and reduce base flows.
The Blanding's turtle, also known as the smiling turtle, is an Ontario native and protected species. Blanding's turtles are distributed across southern and central Ontario within their provincial range. Wetlands are their primary habitat. Unlike other turtles such as the common snapping turtle and eastern painted turtle, which are both native to Ontario, are habitat generalists. Blanding's turtles need shallow wetlands to survive and nest, making them habitat specialists and niche species. The main threat to Blanding's turtle populations is habitat loss and habitat fragmentation caused by road development. According to a population assessment conducted by the Government of Canada between 2002 and 1982 alone, there was a 26% loss of suitable habitat around Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Another significant factor is road fatalities. An estimated 265 to 399 Blanding's turtles are killed on roads each year in Ontario. In about 3 generations, the population is expected to decline by 50% if road fatalities are not reduced. All right, now on to the case study. So there was the potential for a casino to go up in North Bay in the Pinewood Park area, as it was considered for a future casino development. A group called Save the Turtle, Stop the Casino appealed this development. Group members believe the area should have been considered habitat for the already protected Blanding's turtle. It's a watershed area for Lake Nipissing and could be harmful to wetland species such as the Blanding's turtle. With provincial laws considered, the mandatory buffer zone for nesting and overwintering sites for the turtle would deem the 37,000 square foot casino unsuitable. The Ontario Court of Appeal deemed the development unsuitable as well, allowing the land to be protected. So in this case here, the Blanding's turtle kind of acts as an umbrella species, and protecting land for that particular species also protects the land for a lot of other species that people may not care about or don't get as much protection through the government.
So I will be talking about mitigation and conservation within Ontario's wetlands. Currently, Ontario has created a wetland conservation strategy that is a framework to guide future wetland conservation across the province with a common focus to protect wetlands. The conservation strategy consists of 4 main goals: awareness, knowledge, partnership, and conservation. These goals generally aim to raise public awareness and knowledge that is available to help make better decisions to improve wetland conservation, as well as develop conservation approaches and improve policies to conserve the area and function to help stop the net loss of wetlands. Moving on, we have Ontario's wetland policy. Ontario's wetlands are managed through a variety of policies that include over 20 different pieces of legislation. Some of these policies include the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Act that protects the wetlands located in the Oak Ridges Marine from development, the Conservation Authorities Act regulations that regulates the development in and around wetlands for effects on the control of natural hazards, the Endangered Species Act that prohibits the damage and destruction of habitats that consist of endangered or threatened species, the Municipal Act that restricts tree cutting within swamps, and the Invasive Species Act that establishes a regulatory framework to prevent, detect, control, and eradicate invasive species. Additionally, the Provincial Policy Statement, or PPS, prohibits the development and site alteration in all provincially significant wetlands throughout much of southern and central Ontario. But who helps monitor and maintain the wetlands? Ontario is partnered with many different parties that consist of both government and non-government organizations. These parties include private landowners, cultural heritage organizations, environmental organizations, conservation authorities, agricultural communities, First Nations and Métis communities, as well as the Ontario government, who all have a common goal of preserving wetlands. These parties work towards monitoring, maintaining, and enhancing wetlands on both public and private land by working either directly in the wetlands or raising awareness within their communities. So, what are some conservation strategies Ontario is using? As mentioned earlier, phragmites are a highly invasive plant, and Ducks Unlimited Canada is working towards decreasing the number of invasive phragmites within wetland areas. The use of herbicides and mechanical control have seemed to be effective, reducing more than 3,700 acres of phragmites in southern Ontario. Ontario is also currently considering adopting a wetland offsetting policy. This policy is an approach in which negative impacts on wetlands are offset by the intentional restoration or creation of a new wetland. It is important to note that wetland offsetting tends to be the last resort when it comes to wetland conservation, but it can provide positive environmental impacts for wetlands. Ontario's Drainage Act also helps maintain the amount of development and construction within wetland limits. This act also helps restore water quality as well as native plant and animal species. Additionally, the Wetland Evaluation System helps differentiate wetlands so that tailored mitigation approaches can be used that are best for each type of wetland.
Generally speaking, most flourishing wetlands are found in rural areas away from urban growth, but Toronto has its own wetlands scattered across the city as demonstrated on this map. I actually visited G. Rossler Park, Earl Bales, and Dowsey Park to try and implement what we have researched as a group on wetlands and applied them to an urban setting. Starting at G. Rossler Park, it receives water from stormwater runoff as well as being a part of the West Don Land River system. I did not see any aquatic wildlife, but there were geese sitting in the waters. The water was at a low level at the time of my visit, but I imagine the water can rise exponentially throughout the year, possibly over top where I was standing. There was still dead vegetation from last year's growth still laying around, and I'd imagine this would be a dense wetland come summertime. The park also has a dam in the area. It can control water flow within the West Don River system, as well as create a wetland on the downstream part of the dam. Next area I visited was Earl Bales Park, small pond within a dense forest. It also appeared to have invasive Phragmites, as shown in the right picture. The water flows downstream from G. Rossler Park and enters a stormwater retention pond at Earl Bales. Again, I did not see much wildlife aside from geese floating in the water. Toronto has both natural and man-made wetlands. G. Rossler Park in Earl Bales has existed for quite a while but are maintained annually both by the TRCA and City of Toronto. There are also smaller wetlands scattered throughout the city, including one in my area that I did not know about until I looked at a map. I knew about Dowsey Park and the various ponds and wetlands it has, but there was also another stormwater retention pond at a nearby local park, which I will talk about later. Dowsey Park is an area I visit regularly on bike rides and walks. It has 3 bodies of water, a small, medium, and large pond. Both smaller ponds overflow into the big pond during rainfalls. Over the years, I have seen so much wildlife here, including turtles, frogs, swans, and fish. I know for a fact that this is a successful wetland in an urban setting. The last area I visited was at Ridge Park. It is a small wetland, but important nonetheless. I did not know it existed until I created my Google Map image, and have a feeling there are more of these small wetland ecosystems scattered across the city. Small actions like this can help to protect wetland species, as well as the other essential services wetlands provide.
Despite efforts and investments by Ontario's government, restoration ecologists, and non-for-profit organizations like Ontario Nature, attempts to compensate natural wetlands reduction by means of constructed wetlands has found that urban wetlands do not possess the same capacities as naturally occurring ones. Urban wetlands are found to consistently underperform in comparison to natural wetlands when species colonization and ecosystem services are considered, most likely due in part to the rapid urbanization and anthropogenic interference by humans who often use them as areas for storage and treatment of agricultural waste, stormwater runoff, and fluid tailings from mining derived from human activity and urban development. Combined with such unpredictable factors like the introduction of exotic species, urban wetlands and the species they attract are continually exposed to pollution and degraded resources that affect water quality in these landscapes. Human environmental modification also contributes to increased species vulnerability and wetland degradation, as the tool seeks to mimic habitats with higher fitness factors to attract species richness for the benefit of urban communities and human health, but unintentionally leaves species vulnerable to exposure to heavy metals, road salts, fertilizer-fueled eutrophication, and pesticides which enter the system through stormwater runoff and human encroachment. Such alterations to landscape and human behavior further decreases chances of recolonization and survival by sensitive species when species are not able to recognize low-quality landscapes and end up selecting them over ones with higher fitness, thereby exposing them to ecological traps where survivability is drastically limited. Species increase risk of local extinction when such factors like water quality, habitat size, connectivity of landscapes, and other indirect cues that are assumed to accurately reflect habitat quality, like polarized light, are misjudged, leading to uncertainty in the safety and abundance of food, shelter, and overwintering grounds for population growth and species persistence in these constructed habitats.